racist rich kid humiliated a black janitor. He didn't know he was the billionaire CEO who'd decide his future. Pick it up. That's more money than you'll ever make in a week. Laughter erupts in the background. They thought he was just a janitor. The sound hits first, a sharp crash of glass against marble, loud enough to make conversations die mid-sentence. Heads turn. A wine glass lies shattered near the center of the dining room, red liquid bleeding across the polished floor like a stain that refuses to be ignored. Leo freezes with the mop still in his hands. Moments earlier, the restaurant had been calm in that expensive, controlled way. Soft piano music, muted laughter, the low hum of people who never worry about prices. Leo had been moving quietly between tables, eyes down, working the edges of the room the way he always did. Invisible, careful. He knew how to take up as little space as possible. That was how you survived places like this. Then the door swung open. Bryce walked in like he owned the building. He was loud, already laughing before his friends even crossed the threshold, his voice bouncing off the crystal chandeliers. Designer jacket, perfect hair, a watch that probably cost more than Leo made in a year. Behind him trailed two other guys and a girl, all dressed in effortless luxury, all smiling the kind of smile that came from never being told no. Man, this place better be worth it, Bryce said, glancing around with exaggerated boredom. I'm not sitting anywhere near the kitchen. I don't want to smell poor tonight. Laughter erupted from his group. Leo kept his head down and pushed the mop forward, hoping, stupidly, that they wouldn't notice him. They always noticed. Bryce stopped walking. His eyes landed on Leo like a spotlight snapping on. A slow grin spread across his face, the kind that meant someone else was about to pay for his amusement. "Well, look at that," Bryce said loudly. "They've got janitors cleaning the floor while we're eating now? That's a new level of ambiance." More laughter. People at nearby tables shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Leo felt the familiar heat rise in his chest. He told himself to keep moving. Don't react. Don't give them what they want. Bryce stepped closer, deliberately careless. He lifted his glass, pretending to gesture while talking, and then, too casually to be an accident, tilted it. Red wine poured down Leo's sleeve, soaking into the thin fabric of his shirt, dripping onto the floor he had just cleaned. "Oh, my bad," Bryce said, not even trying to sound sorry. "Guess that's what mops are for, right?" Someone snorted. Leo swallowed. His hands tightened around the mop handle, but he didn't move. He could feel eyes on him from every corner of the room. Customers pretending to check their phones, servers frozen behind trays, the manager standing near the bar, watching, calculating, choosing silence. "I'll clean it up," Leo said quietly. Bryce blinked, then laughed harder. "Wow, he talks." Bryce reached into his pocket, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and flicked it toward the floor. It fluttered down, landing right in the wine puddle. "Here," Bryce said, "that should cover it. Pick it up." For a second, time stretched thin. Leo looked at the bill, looked at the wine soaking into the marble, looked at Bryce's shoes, spotless, expensive, planted inches from his face. No one spoke. No one stepped in. Leo bent down. The humiliation was physical, a weight pressing between his shoulders as he knelt and picked up the soggy bill with shaking fingers. The room felt smaller, heavier, like the air itself was watching him. "Unbelievable," Bryce muttered. "Some people really have no pride." Leo stood, folded the bill carefully, and tucked it into his pocket. He didn't look at Bryce. He just picked up the mop and started cleaning again. Slower now, more deliberate, as if he could scrub the moment away. Bryce wasn't done. "Hey, janitor," he called after him. "Make sure you get under the table too. I don't want my shoes touching anything you missed." Leo obeyed. The second scene unfolded like a slow-motion accident everyone could see coming, but no one stopped. Bryce followed him, circling like a bored predator. "You know," he said, loud enough for half the room to hear, I used to think people like you didn't exist. I mean, how do you even end up here? Didn't your parents tell you school was a thing?" Leo kept his eyes on the floor. Bryce laughed and pointed at Leo's phone, half visible where it stuck out of his back pocket. The screen was cracked, spiderweb from one corner to the other. "Is that thing still alive?" "Wow. Vintage." He leaned in closer. "Let me guess. You're saving up for a new one, right? Or does minimum wage not cover that?" More laughter, sharper this time. "Careful," Bryce added, smirking. "If you drop that thing, you'll probably have to work here another 10 years to replace it." Leo felt every word like a slap. He could feel anger coiling inside him, tight and dangerous, but he pushed it down the way he always did. Anger didn't pay bills. Anger didn't buy medicine. Anger didn't keep a roof over your head. Across the room, Maya had just walked in. She stopped short when she saw what was happening. Her eyes flicked from Bryce to Leo, taking in the wine-stained shirt, the mop, the bill on the floor. Her lips parted, and for a moment it looked like she might say something. She didn't. Her friends tugged at her arm, whispering. Bryce noticed her hesitation and straightened, his voice dropping into a smooth, practiced tone. "Hey," he said, "don't worry about it. He's just doing his job." Maya looked at Leo again. Their eyes met for a split second. Leo didn't accuse her with his gaze. He didn't beg. He just looked tired, and that somehow made it worse. She looked away. Bryce grinned, satisfied. He pulled another bill from his wallet, let it fall deliberately to the floor. "Here's a tip," he said. "Maybe if you work hard enough, one day you won't have to clean up after people like me." Leo stared at the money. His throat tightened. He thought of his mother, pale under hospital lights, apologizing for being sick like it was her fault. He thought of the bills stacked on their kitchen table. He thought of the nights he stayed up until dawn, fingers flying over a keyboard no one here knew he touched. Slowly, he knelt again. As he picked up the bill, his hand brushed the floor, cold and unforgiving. The laughter echoed above him, but somewhere beneath it, something hardened. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter, more dangerous. The kind of resolve that didn't make noise. When Leo stood back up, Bryce had already turned away, bored now that the show was over. The room returned to its low hum, as if nothing had happened at all. But Leo knew better. This wasn't just humiliation. It was a line being drawn. And even as he returned to his work, eyes down, shoulders bent, the first hook had sunk deep into the audience watching. Because everyone could feel it. This wasn't over. When the restaurant doors close and the laughter fades, the world finally goes quiet. This is the part no one ever sees. The apartment was quiet in the way only poor places ever were. Not peaceful, just emptied of sound, as if noise itself cost money. Leo closed the door behind him without turning on the overhead light. The bulb flickered when he tried anyway, then gave up completely. He didn't bother twisting the switch again. He knew this darkness. He had grown used to moving through it. The room was small enough that everything existed in the same breath. The narrow kitchen, the sagging couch, the fold-out table with one uneven leg. A faint smell of disinfectant mixed with something metallic lingered in the air, sharp enough to sting the nose. Medicine. Always medicine. From the bedroom came the soft, uneven sound of breathing. Leo slipped off his shoes and crossed the room quietly. The floor creaked under his weight, and he froze for a second, listening. When the breathing didn't change, he continued, careful with every step. His mother lay propped up on pillows that had lost their shape years ago. Her skin looked thinner than he remembered, almost translucent under the dim lamp by the bed. An open pill bottle sat on the nightstand beside a half-empty glass of water. The label was creased from being folded and unfolded too many times. "You're late," she said softly, without opening her eyes. "I had to stay longer," Leo replied. He tried to keep his voice steady. "Someone called in sick." She smiled faintly. She always smiled, even when it hurt. "Did they pay you extra?" He hesitated just long enough to be dishonest without lying. A little. She opened her eyes then and looked at him the way only a mother could. Not accusing, just knowing. "You don't have to carry everything alone," she said. Leo nodded, though they both knew it wasn't true. He adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, careful not to touch the IV line taped to her arm. The plastic tube led to nothing now, just a reminder of hospital rooms and beeping machines and bills that arrived faster than hope ever did. "How's the pain?" he asked. She shrugged. "It comes and goes. The new medicine helps." She paused, then added quietly, "If we can keep paying for it." Leo looked away. On the table by the window sat a stack of envelopes. He didn't need to open them to know what they were. Rent notices, hospital statements, final reminders that never meant final at all, just louder. "I'll figure it out," he said, more to himself than to her. She reached out and took his hand. Her grip was weak, but firm in intention. "Leo," she said, and waited until he looked at her. "Listen to me." He leaned closer. "Don't ever hate people for being rich," she said gently. "Hate them for being cruel." The words settled between them, heavy and calm at the same time. Leo swallowed. He had heard versions of this his whole life, but tonight it landed differently. He thought of the restaurant, the wine, the money on the floor. "I don't hate anyone," he said. She smiled again, tired but sincere. "I know," she said. "That's what scares me sometimes." When she fell asleep, Leo sat there for a long moment, watching her chest rise and fall. Every breath felt like borrowed time. He stood up quietly and moved back into the main room. He pulled his laptop from beneath the table, its surface scratched and dented from years of being shoved into backpacks and corners. When he opened it, the screen glowed to life, illuminating the room with pale blue light. Lines of code filled the display instantly, dense and intricate, scrolling farther than the eye could follow. This was the other world, the one no one ever saw. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second, then began to move. Fast, precise. The exhaustion from the day didn't matter here. The humiliation didn't matter. The noise in his head quieted as logic took over. Functions nested inside functions. Algorithms layered with efficiency most people never learned existed. He toggled between windows, refining a process, optimizing a pathway, shaving milliseconds off response times no one else would even notice. To Leo, it was all music. On another screen, the interface of the app took shape, clean, intuitive, elegant in its simplicity. No unnecessary decoration, no wasted movement, everything where it belonged. He tested it again, and again. It worked. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance and faded. Inside, the only sound was the soft clicking of keys and the hum of an old fan struggling to push warm air around the room. Leo leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. The clock on the wall blinked 2:17 a.m. He thought of how many hours of cleaning floors and carrying trays it would take to pay for one more week of medicine. He thought of the envelopes on the table. Then he looked back at the screen. This wasn't a dream. It wasn't a fantasy. It was real. It was finished. And no one knew. Not the people who laughed at him, not the manager who looked away, not the boy who threw money at his feet. Leo closed the laptop carefully, as if it were something fragile. He slid it back under the table and stood in the darkness for a moment, breathing. The world still saw a janitor, but somewhere beneath the weight of debt and sickness and silence, something else had already begun. The night didn't end when Leo closed his laptop. It only paused. Morning arrived without ceremony. No sunlight spilled dramatically through the windows, only a thin gray glow pressing against the blinds. Leo stepped into the school hallway with the same quiet presence he carried everywhere else, a backpack slung over one shoulder, his eyes already tired. The echoes of lockers slamming and voices bouncing off the walls felt distant, like noise coming from another life. Then he saw the crowd, Students were gathered around the main bulletin board near the administration office, phones out, voices overlapping with excitement. Someone laughed. Someone else swore under their breath in disbelief. Leo slowed without meaning to, drawn forward by the same instinct that had kept him alive through worse than curiosity. In the center of the board was a new flyer, printed on thick paper, the school logo embossed at the top like a seal of authority. It announced a regional competition sponsored by a private tech fund. Real money, not gift cards or trophies. Cash prizes large enough to change things. And more than that, the promise that made people stand straighter when they read it. Direct access to investors. Leo read every word carefully. Eligibility, submission deadlines, presentation dates. His heartbeat settled into a steady rhythm, not from excitement, but from focus. This wasn't impossible. This wasn't a dream someone else was allowed to have. A familiar laugh cut through the air. "Guess I'll see you all at the finals," Bryce said, loud enough to make sure no one missed it. He pushed his way to the front, flanked by friends who already looked impressed. He barely glanced at the flyer before turning back to the crowd, confidence dripping from every movement. "My dad already paid someone to build the project," he said casually. "All I have to do is show up." Someone whistled. Someone else muttered that it must be nice. Bryce grinned, feeding on it. Leo watched from the edge of the group. He didn't react. He didn't scoff. He just looked at the flyer again, memorizing details the way others memorized excuses. For a moment, the hallway noise faded, replaced by the quiet clicking of keys in his mind, the logic of systems already built and tested. Bryce noticed him then. "Well, well," he said, eyes narrowing slightly. "What are you doing here?" Leo didn't answer. Bryce smirked and leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to feel personal. "This isn't for people like you," he said. "These competitions are about innovation, about vision, not about cleaning floors and emptying trash cans." Leo met his gaze briefly. There was no fire in his eyes, no challenge, just something unreadable. The bell rang, sharp and abrupt, breaking the moment. Students scattered, excitement trailing behind them like static. Leo took one last look at the flyer before turning away, his jaw set in quiet resolve. That afternoon passed like a blur. Classes ended, chairs scraped, the building slowly emptied. Leo stayed behind to work, changing into his uniform as the halls grew quiet again. The same floors, the same routine, the same eyes that slid past him as if he were part of the furniture. Bryce passed him near the lockers, keys to a luxury car dangling from his fingers. He slowed just enough to deliver one final line, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Stay in your lane, janitor." Leo didn't respond. He waited until the building was empty, until the lights dimmed and the silence returned. Then he went home. The apartment greeted him the same way it always did, with stillness and the faint hum of something struggling to work. Leo checked on his mother, adjusted her blanket, then moved back to the table by the window. He opened the laptop. The screen glowed softly, familiar and steady. He didn't hesitate this time. His fingers moved with purpose, navigating to the final build. The app loaded smoothly, every function responding exactly as it should. No errors, no crashes, no uncertainty. Leo took a breath. He clicked Upload. A progress bar appeared, inching forward with quiet determination. His eyes followed it, not blinking. When it reached the end, a single confirmation message appeared on the screen. Upload successful. Below it was the username, not his name, not anything that could be traced back to the boy people laughed at or ignored. Just a handle, anonymous, unassuming, untouchable. Leo closed the laptop slowly and leaned back in his chair. Outside, the city continued as it always did, unaware that anything had changed. No one knew what he had just set in motion, and that was exactly how he wanted it. The upload didn't change the room. The table was still uneven. The air was still heavy with the smell of medicine. The envelopes were still stacked where Leo had left them. If this was the beginning of something, it didn't announce itself. The announcement came the next morning. Leo was halfway through wiping down a row of lockers when his phone vibrated in his pocket. He almost ignored it. Notifications usually meant nothing he could afford to care about. Another reminder, another warning, another number he didn't have. The screen lit up with a message from an unknown sender. "Hey, someone says you're good with code." Leo stared at it longer than he should have. His first instinct was caution. His second was exhaustion. He typed back slowly, "Depends who's asking." The reply came immediately. "I know a guy who's desperate. Midterms project, needs it done fast, pays well." Leo closed his eyes for a moment. He could already feel the weight of the choice pressing down on him. He thought of the hospital hallway, the way the floor felt cold even through his shoes. He thought of the pharmacist's voice when she said the medication wasn't covered anymore. He thought of the progress bar on his laptop, already finished, already waiting. "How well?" he asked. The number that came back made his stomach drop. It was enough for a month of medicine. Enough to stop the calls. Enough to buy time. He leaned against the locker and slid down until he was sitting on the floor, mop forgotten, beside him. Around him, the school moved on. Footsteps passed. Laughter echoed. No one noticed him there, weighing the future against the present. Another message appeared. "Or," the sender added, "you could just sell the code. One-time thing. Clean. No hassle." Leo felt something tighten in his chest. Selling the code would be easier, faster. He wouldn't have to explain anything to anyone. He wouldn't have to stand in front of a room and pretend he belonged there. He could hand it over, take the money, and go back to cleaning floors like nothing had changed. He unlocked his phone again, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then he heard his mother's voice, not from memory, but from something deeper, steadier. "Don't ever hate people for being rich. Hate them for being cruel." This wasn't cruelty, but it wasn't right either. Leo stood up slowly. He typed one final response. "No." The typing bubble appeared on the other end, paused, disappeared, then returned. "You're making a mistake." Leo didn't reply. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and picked up the mop. The floor didn't care about his decisions. The work didn't change. But something in him had settled. He had chosen the harder road. Again. That night he barely slept. When he opened his laptop the next morning, the screen didn't greet him with silence. Notifications stacked on top of each other, small red numbers multiplying faster than he could process. Downloads, comments, shares. He blinked, sure it was a glitch. He refreshed the page. The numbers climbed higher. Someone had posted a clip of the app online. A short demo, clean interface, instant results. The comments were pouring in. "This is insane. How is this free? Who built this?" Leo scrolled, his heart pounding. Reviews followed. 5 stars. Then more. Someone tagged a tech forum. Someone else shared it to a startup thread. Within hours, the app had a name people were repeating, a reputation growing without him saying a word. He closed the laptop and went to work. By midday, his phone vibrated again, and again, and again. He didn't check it until his break, sitting on the back steps behind the building, the concrete warm beneath him. When he unlocked the screen, his breath caught. An email, subject line, "Inquiry regarding your product." The sender wasn't someone asking for homework. It wasn't a spam address or a fake account. The domain was clean, professional, real. They praised the app without exaggeration. They asked questions that showed they understood exactly what they were looking at. They didn't ask who he was. They didn't need to. They asked if he was open to a conversation. Leo stared at the screen, his hands trembling slightly. This wasn't luck. This wasn't charity. This was recognition. Quiet, precise, earned. He didn't reply right away. Around him, nothing changed. Bryce walked past later that afternoon, complaining loudly about how long it took his custom project team to deliver updates. He didn't look at Leo. Teachers still rushed by, preoccupied. Students stepped around him without noticing the phone buzzing in his pocket. Leo wiped down a desk and watched the sun shift across the hallway floor. He had never felt so close to something so large while remaining completely unseen. That evening, the comments doubled, then tripled. Tech blogs picked it up. Someone posted a breakdown of the app's efficiency, praising its architecture without knowing the person behind it was sitting at a fold-out table in a dark apartment, eating cold leftovers and listening to his mother cough softly in the next room. Another email arrived, then another. Different senders, same tone. Interest, serious interest. Leo replied to only one, short, polite, non-committal. He closed the laptop again and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The paint above him was cracked, peeling at the edges. He had memorized every flaw in that ceiling over the years. Now, for the first time, it felt temporary. The app continued to grow without him touching it. People talked about it in rooms he would never be invited into. Decisions were being made somewhere far away, triggered by something he had built in silence. And still, no one around him knew. To them, he was the same janitor, the same quiet presence, the same easy target. The pressure didn't ease, it sharpened. Because the higher the app climbed, the more fragile his balance became. One wrong move, one exposed truth, one mistake, and everything he had chosen the hard way could still be taken from him. The climb had begun, and so had the fall. The first sign that something was wrong came quietly. Leo noticed it in the way conversations stopped when he entered a room. In the way people who usually looked through him now looked at him just a second too long. The hallways felt tighter, the air heavier, as if the building itself had decided to turn against him. By the time the accusation arrived, it felt almost inevitable. He was mopping the science wing when the assistant principal's voice came over the intercom, clipped and formal, asking him to report to the office immediately. No explanation, no hesitation. A few students glanced up, curious, already hungry for something to break the monotony of their day. Leo set the mop against the wall and walked. Inside the office, Bryce was already there. He sat back in a chair with practiced ease, one ankle resting on the opposite knee, his posture relaxed in a way that didn't belong in a room built for discipline. His father's influence lingered around him like a protective field, invisible but understood. On the desk between him and the administrator lay a laptop. Leo recognized it instantly. It was his. The assistant principal didn't invite him to sit. "Do you know why you're here?" she asked. Leo looked at the laptop, then at Bryce. Bryce didn't meet his eyes. He smiled at the window instead, as if watching something entertaining unfold outside. "I don't," Leo said. The woman sighed and slid the laptop closer to him, stopping just short of his reach. "This device was found in a restricted classroom last night," she said. "It contains proprietary material belonging to another student." Bryce leaned forward slightly. "My project," he said softly. "The one my dad paid for." Leo felt the room tilt. "That's not," he started. "We also have security footage," the assistant principal continued, cutting him off. "You were seen in the building after hours." Leo's throat tightened. Of course he was. He cleaned the building. He was always there after hours. "That doesn't mean I stole anything," he said, keeping his voice steady. "That code is mine." Bryce laughed just under his breath. "You expect us to believe that?" he asked, finally turning to face Leo. "You?" The assistant principal's expression hardened. "This is a serious accusation," she said. "Academic dishonesty, theft, and given your position here—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Leo tried to explain. He talked about the app, about building it from scratch, about how long it had taken. Every word felt smaller than the one before it. The more he spoke, the more the room closed in. When he finished, there was a silence that told him everything. "We're suspending you effective immediately," the assistant principal said, pending further investigation. And his job? Bryce asked, too quickly to be innocent. The woman hesitated, then nodded. The school can't employ someone under suspicion of theft. Leo felt something inside him give way, not with a snap, but with a slow, painful tear. "You're firing me," he said quietly. "We're letting you go," she corrected. Bryce stood, smoothing out his jacket. As he passed Leo, he leaned in just enough for only him to hear. "Told you," he whispered. "Wrong lane." By the time Leo stepped outside, his badge taken, his hours erased, the sky had darkened. He stood on the front steps for a long moment, holding the strap of his backpack like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Students walked past him, some whispering, some staring openly now. No one asked what happened. They already thought they knew. The news spread faster than the truth ever could. By the next morning, the suspension was common knowledge. Screens buzzed with rumors dressed up as facts. Leo saw his name in group chats he didn't belong to, attached to words like thief and fraud. He kept his head down as he walked through the halls one last time to clear out his locker. That was when he saw Maya. She stood with her friends near the stairs, her phone in her hand. She wasn't smiling. She looked unsettled, her brows drawn together as she read whatever was on her screen. Leo slowed without meaning to. For a moment, he thought she might look up, that she might see him and say something. She did look up. Their eyes met across the hallway, and in that brief second, everything he didn't say hung between them. The humiliation, the accusation, the truth he couldn't prove. Maya opened her mouth and closed it again. Her friends leaned in, whispering urgently. One of them shook her head slightly, a subtle warning. Maya glanced back at her phone, then at Leo again. She didn't move. Leo waited longer than he should have. He didn't know what he was hoping for. A question, a doubt, anything. Nothing came. She turned away. The hallway felt louder after that, the noise sharper, more invasive. Leo swallowed and kept walking. Each step carried him farther from something he hadn't realized he was already losing. Outside, he sat on the low wall near the entrance, the same place he had taken breaks during long shifts. He watched students pass, watched teachers avoid his gaze. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't check it. He didn't need to. Being fired was one thing. Being suspended was another. But being silently judged by the one person he thought might understand, that was what hollowed him out. By the time he reached home, the weight of it all had settled into his bones. He dropped his bag by the door and leaned against the wall, eyes closed. The apartment felt smaller than ever. The envelopes on the table hadn't moved. His mother's coughing echoed faintly from the bedroom. Leo opened his laptop with hands that felt heavier now. The app was still there. The numbers were still climbing. Emails continued to arrive, unread. None of it mattered in that moment. Because for the first time since this all began, the pressure wasn't just from money or time. It was personal now, sharp, relentless. Bryce had taken something from him that couldn't be replaced with success, and Maya's silence had made sure it stayed gone. Leo stared at the screen, the glow reflecting in his tired eyes, and realized with a sinking certainty that the hardest part of this story hadn't happened yet. It was just getting started. The call came just after midnight. Leo had been sitting at the kitchen table, elbows resting on the scarred surface, staring at a bill he had already memorized. The numbers didn't change no matter how long he looked at them. They only grew heavier. From the bedroom came the sound of his mother coughing, deeper now, rougher, like her body was fighting something it was tired of fighting. Then the phone rang, not buzzed, rang. Leo flinched. No one ever called at that hour unless something was wrong. He answered before the second ring finished. Her name was all the nurse had to say. "She collapsed," the voice on the other end said, professional but urgent. "She's being brought in now. You need to come immediately." Leo didn't remember grabbing his jacket. He didn't remember locking the door. He only remembered running. The rain started halfway there, sudden and unforgiving, soaking through his clothes within seconds. By the time he reached the hospital entrance, his shoes were slick, his hair plastered to his forehead, his breath coming in sharp, uneven bursts. The emergency room was chaos. Stretchers, raised voices, the constant, piercing rhythm of machines that never slept. Leo stood frozen for a moment, searching every face, every blur of motion, until he saw her. She looked smaller on the gurney than she had at home, paler, tubes already snaking around her, hands moving quickly, efficiently, as people spoke in clipped sentences he couldn't fully process. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice barely holding together. A doctor turned to him. "We're stabilizing her," she said, "but she needs treatment tonight. Tests, medication, possibly surgery." Leo nodded. "Do whatever you need," he said without hesitation. The doctor paused. "We'll need to discuss coverage," she said carefully. "There's a payment issue on file." Leo felt the words land before he understood them. "I don't have it," he said. "Not yet, but I will. I promise." The doctor's expression softened, but it didn't change the reality behind it. "We'll do what we can," she said, "but you need to speak with admissions." Admissions was quieter, brighter, crueler. The woman behind the desk tapped at her computer, her screen reflected faintly in Leo's wide eyes. "Your insurance lapsed," she said. "The outstanding balance is—" "I know," Leo interrupted. "Please, she needs help, now." The woman looked at him for a long moment. Then she slid a clipboard across the counter. "Sign here," she said. "We'll proceed, but you'll be responsible for the costs." Leo signed without reading. His name felt foreign under his hand. Hours passed without shape. He sat in a plastic chair that dug into his spine, his wet clothes clinging to him as the air conditioning hummed relentlessly overhead. He watched other families' faces, pray, argue, break down. He checked his phone obsessively, then stopped checking it altogether. At some point, a nurse came out and told him his mother was stable. Not better, just stable. When the doors finally closed behind her, Leo found himself outside without remembering deciding to leave. The rain had intensified, pounding against the pavement, against the glass, against him. He stood beneath the dim glow of a streetlight, water streaming down his face, his jacket heavy and useless. Cars passed without slowing, tires hissing through puddles like nothing in the world was wrong. Leo pressed his hands to his eyes and breathed, slow and deep, trying to hold himself together. He had no job, no school, no money. Everything he had built in silence meant nothing here. The phone vibrated in his hand. He almost ignored it. Almost. Unknown sender. For a moment he just stared at the screen, rain blurring his vision. Then he opened the message. "We've been following your work closely." Leo's heart stuttered. "We'd like to meet, in person." He read it again, and again. The words didn't change. Another message appeared beneath it, as if whoever was on the other end understood he might doubt what he was seeing. "This is a serious inquiry." Leo let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His hands shook, whether from the cold or something else he couldn't tell. He looked back at the hospital doors, glowing white against the darkness, then down at the cracked screen of his phone. Hope didn't arrive loudly. It slipped in quietly, fragile and uncertain, barely daring to exist. He typed back with numb fingers. "When?" The reply came faster than he expected. "Soon." Leo lowered the phone and closed his eyes, rain washing over him as he stood there, caught between two worlds. Behind him was everything he was about to lose. Ahead of him was something he didn't fully trust yet. He stayed there for a long moment, alone under the streetlight, suspended between desperation and the faintest promise of relief. By the time he turned back toward the hospital, nothing had been solved. But for the first time in days, something had shifted. The room was designed to intimidate. Glass walls rose from polished floors, framing a city skyline that looked impossibly distant from the life Leo had been living just days before. A long table stretched across the center, lined with empty chairs waiting for people who moved money instead of furniture. At the far end, a small stage stood beneath a screen, already glowing with a company logo that didn't belong to Bryce, no matter how confidently he claimed it did. Leo stood just inside the doorway, unnoticed. He wore the same jacket he'd worn to the hospital, clean but still worn at the edges. His hands were steady now, though his chest felt tight, like everything he had been carrying was pressing forward at once, demanding to be resolved. Across the room, Bryce owned the space. He paced near the stage, laughing loudly, shaking hands with people who already seemed impressed. His suit fit perfectly. His posture was relaxed, his smile practiced. This was where he believed he belonged. This was the world he had rehearsed for in mirrors and conversations. The version of himself polished by money and reinforced by entitlement. When his name was called, he stepped onto the stage without hesitation. "Thank you all for being here," Bryce began, his voice confident, smooth, amplified just enough to command attention. "What I'm about to show you isn't just an app, it's the future." Slides appeared behind him, clean and professional. Too clean. Leo watched from the back as Bryce spoke about innovation and disruption, about efficiency and scalability. The words flowed easily, borrowed from pitches he had heard before, strung together like expensive accessories. Heads nodded. Pens moved across notepads. Interest flickered in the room. For a moment, it almost worked. Then the question started. A man near the center of the table leaned forward slightly. He didn't smile. His suit was understated, his expression unreadable. "You mentioned your system optimizes response time under load," he said calmly. "Can you explain how your architecture handles concurrent requests without bottlenecking?" Bryce didn't miss a beat. "Absolutely," he said. "We've built in redundancy to ensure smooth performance." The man nodded slowly. "Redundancy where?" Bryce paused, just a fraction of a second too long. "In the back end," he said. "Our team implemented—" "What framework are you using?" Another voice cut in. This one came from a woman seated near the edge of the table, her tone polite but sharp. "And why did you choose it over alternatives?" Bryce's smile tightened. "It's proprietary," he said. "We're still finalizing details." A murmur rippled through the room. Not disapproval, not yet, just curiosity sharpening into something more focused. The first man spoke again. "Fair enough. Then perhaps you can walk us through your onboarding flow. Specifically, how you reduce user drop-off during initial setup." Bryce clicked to the next slide. The diagram appeared, neat and simple. Too simple. "Well," he said, "the interface is intuitive. Users just get it." Leo felt a flicker of something inside him. Not satisfaction, anticipation. "Intuitive doesn't happen by accident," the woman said. "What metrics did you test to validate that assumption?" Bryce shifted his weight. "We've seen strong engagement." "From where?" the man asked. "Your analytics dashboard should show retention curves. Can you pull that up?" The room grew quieter. Bryce glanced toward the side of the stage, where a technician stood near a laptop connected to the display. "That data isn't loaded," he said. "We can provide it later." Another pause, longer this time. "And the security layer?" someone else asked. "How are you handling authentication?" Bryce's confidence wavered, just enough to be noticed. "We use industry standards," he said quickly. "Nothing out of the ordinary." The man at the center leaned back in his chair. "Standards evolve," he said. "What did you do differently?" Bryce opened his mouth, closed it, laughed lightly, as if the moment could be brushed aside. "These are technical details," he said. "What matters is the vision." Leo watched as the energy in the room shifted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone not trained to see it. Interest didn't disappear, it recalibrated. People exchanged glances. Pens stopped moving. The woman spoke again. Vision matters, she said, but execution is everything. Bryce nodded too quickly. Of course, he said, and our execution speaks for itself. Does it? The man asked. He tapped something on his tablet. The screen behind Bryce flickered, then changed. A live demo loaded. The interface appeared, familiar in every detail. Clean, responsive, elegant. Bryce's eyes widened just slightly. Can you log in? The man asked. Bryce swallowed. The credentials should be yours, the woman said. You built it. Bryce laughed again, the sound sharper now. Right, of course. He turned to the technician. Go ahead. The technician typed, then stopped. It's asking for a key, he said quietly. Bryce frowned. Try again. The technician did. The same prompt appeared. A silence settled over the room, thick and waiting. Leo stepped forward. His shoes echoed softly against the floor, each step measured, deliberate. Heads turned as he approached the aisle, confusion flickering across unfamiliar faces. Bryce noticed him then, his expression shifting from irritation to disbelief. What are you doing here? Bryce hissed under his breath as Leo reached the edge of the stage. Leo didn't answer. He looked past Bryce, toward the people who held the future in their hands, and felt the weight of everything he had endured press into a single, steady resolve. The questions had done their work. Now it was time for the truth to finish it. The technician glanced up from the laptop, uncertainty creeping into his voice. It's requesting an admin key, he said. This isn't a standard login. Bryce waved a hand, impatience flashing across his face. It's fine, he said quickly. That's just an extra layer, for security. The man at the center of the table didn't look convinced. Then you should know how it works, he said. What encryption method are you using for that layer? Bryce's mouth opened, closed. He cleared his throat. It's adaptive, he said, designed to evolve with usage. A few people exchanged glances. Adaptive how? The woman asked. Rule-based? Machine-learned? Hybrid? Bryce smiled, but the smile no longer reached his eyes. Hybrid, he said, obviously. Then explain the logic, the man said calmly. What determines the trigger conditions? Bryce shifted his stance. He looked toward the screen as if the answers might appear there. The system analyzes behavior, he said. Patterns, you know, standard stuff. Patterns are meaningless without thresholds, the woman replied. What are yours? The room felt tighter now, the air heavier. Bryce laughed again, a little too loudly. You're getting into the weeds, he said. Most users don't care about this. That's not who we're asking, the man said. We care. Bryce's fingers curled at his sides. Look, he said, forcing confidence back into his voice. My team handled the technical build. I focused on strategy. And yet you presented yourself as the creator, the woman said gently. Creators usually know their own logic. Bryce's jaw tightened. I know enough. Then enter the key, the man said, nodding toward the laptop. The technician turned the screen slightly so Bryce could see it clearly. A single field blinked patiently, waiting. Bryce leaned over, typing quickly, as if speed could replace certainty. The screen paused, then flashed red. Invalid. He frowned and tried again. Slower this time. More deliberate. Invalid. A bead of sweat formed near his temple. He wiped it away, laughing under his breath. Must be the wrong environment, he said. We're probably on a staging build. Then switch environments, the woman said. The technician shook his head. This is the live version, he said. There's only one admin key. Bryce straightened, his confidence cracking audibly now. That can't be right. Why not? The man asked. Because I would know it, Bryce snapped, then caught himself. I mean, of course I know it. Then please, the man said, folding his hands. Go ahead. Bryce stared at the screen. The blinking cursor felt louder than the silence around it. He typed again and again. Each failure landed heavier than the last. Invalid, invalid, invalid. The murmurs started quietly, then grew. Not accusations, observations, the most dangerous kind. Can you explain the load balancing logic? Someone asked from farther down the table. How does it prioritize requests under peak traffic? Another voice added. What happens when two nodes fail simultaneously? Bryce didn't answer. He looked out over the room, searching for something. Sympathy, distraction, rescue. What he found instead were faces sharpening with clarity, interest turning into scrutiny. I don't understand, Bryce said, his voice rising slightly. This was tested. By whom? The woman asked. My team, he said. And you reviewed the results? The man pressed. Yes, Bryce said too quickly. Of course. Then summarize them, the man said. Just the highlights. Bryce swallowed. His mouth opened but nothing came out. The screen behind him still displayed the login prompt, unchanged, unforgiving, a simple request he couldn't fulfill. The technician shifted uncomfortably. We can't proceed without access, he said quietly. Bryce's shoulders stiffened. Give me a minute, he said, his voice tight. There must be. Time is something we don't have, the man interrupted, not unkindly. We've been patient. The silence that followed was different now. It wasn't waiting, it was judging. Across the room, Leo stood still, watching the tension coil tighter with every unanswered question. He felt no rush, no triumph, just a calm certainty settling in his chest. Bryce had run out of words, and the cracks were no longer small enough to hide. Leo didn't rush. That was the first thing people noticed, even before they fully registered who he was. He didn't stride in like someone about to make an announcement. He didn't clear his throat or raise his hand. He simply walked forward from the back of the room, calm, unhurried, still wearing the same plain jacket, the same scuffed shoes that didn't belong in a room like this. A few heads turned, then more. Someone near the table chuckled under their breath. Another leaned toward their neighbor and whispered something with a smirk. The contrast was almost absurd. Glass walls, tailored suits, and a young man who looked like he had taken a wrong turn while cleaning the hallway. Bryce saw him and froze. What is he doing here? Bryce said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. His voice cracked slightly, sharp with irritation and something else he didn't want to name. Leo didn't look at him. Not yet. He shouldn't be in this room, Bryce added quickly, louder now, trying to reclaim control. This is a private meeting. The man at the center of the table raised a hand, not to stop Leo, but to signal curiosity. Let him come, he said. Leo stopped a few feet from the stage. Up close, the laughter felt louder, more pointed. He could see it in their faces now. The same look he'd seen in the restaurant, the same assumption that whatever he was about to do would be embarrassing for him. You lost? Someone asked lightly. Leo lifted his gaze, meeting the eyes of the investors one by one. There was no anger there, no apology either, just focus. I was invited, he said. Bryce laughed, a brittle sound that echoed too long. By who? He asked. You? The man at the table glanced down at his tablet, then back up at Leo. Are you the one behind the account we contacted? He asked. Yes, Leo replied. A pause followed. Not disbelief, not yet, just a recalibration. Bryce scoffed. This is ridiculous, he said. He's a janitor. He cleans floors. He doesn't even... Leo stepped past him. The technician instinctively shifted aside, confusion written across his face. Leo rested his hands lightly on the edge of the table, eyes already on the laptop screen. The login field still blinked patiently, waiting for something Bryce had never been able to give it. You're welcome to stop me, Leo said quietly, without turning around. No one did. He typed. Not quickly, not dramatically, just efficiently, like someone who knew exactly what the system was asking for and why. The cursor moved. The key entered. The screen paused for half a second that felt longer than all the minutes Bryce had spent stumbling. Then the interface changed. The dashboard loaded instantly, smooth and responsive. Data populated the screen in clean lines and shifting graphs. Metrics updated in real time. The app responded to input without hesitation, every function working exactly as it had been designed to. A low murmur rippled through the room. This time, it wasn't curiosity, it was recognition. Leo navigated through the system with ease, pulling up retention curves, security layers, performance logs. He didn't explain unless asked. He didn't boast. He let the work speak in the language it had always known. The woman leaned forward, eyes narrowing slightly. "Can you show us how you handle peak traffic?" she asked. Leo tapped a few keys. The simulation ran. The system adjusted seamlessly. "And authentication?" the man asked. Leo opened another panel, revealing the logic Bryce had never been able to describe. Silence settled again. But it wasn't judgment now. It was awe, tempered with calculation. Behind him, Bryce stood completely still. "That's impossible," Bryce said finally, his voice thin. "That's my project." Leo turned then. For the first time since walking into the room, he looked directly at Bryce. There was no triumph in his expression, no satisfaction, just a quiet finality. "The janitor you humiliated," Leo said evenly, "built everything you're standing on." The words didn't land with a bang. They landed with weight. Bryce's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His confidence collapsed inward, folding in on itself as the truth rearranged the room around him. The laughter from earlier felt distant now, misplaced, almost shameful. The man at the table stood. "Thank you for coming," he said to Leo, extending a hand. "We've been trying to reach you for weeks." Leo shook it. Around them the room shifted. Assumptions crumbled quietly, without ceremony. What had looked like a mistake minutes ago now looked like the only thing that made sense. Leo stepped back slightly, letting the screen continue to glow behind him. The reveal was complete, and there was no going back. The silence didn't break right away. It stretched, heavy and electric, as the numbers on the screen continued to move, alive in a way Bryce's words never had been. No one laughed now. No one whispered. Every eye in the room was fixed on Leo, as if they were all seeing him for the first time and realizing how badly they had misjudged the shape of the story. The man at the center of the table stood fully, straightening his jacket with deliberate calm. He didn't rush. Moments like this didn't need speed. "I think it's time we stop pretending," he said. He turned slightly so the room could see the document displayed on his tablet. A contract. Pages of legal language most people never bothered to read, except for the number at the bottom. Several people leaned forward instinctively. "We completed the acquisition early this morning," the man continued, "after weeks of due diligence." He looked at Leo, then back at the room. "The app you've just seen wasn't pitched to us today. It was built months ago, independently, in silence." The woman beside him nodded. "We didn't invest," she added. "We bought." A murmur swept through the room, sharp and uncontrolled now. "For a valuation in the high 8 figures," the man said evenly, "with an option to scale well beyond that." Bryce staggered back a step, his face draining of color. "That's not possible," he said. You can't just—" "We can," the man replied. "And we did." He turned to Leo again. "Which brings us to the part that seems to surprise everyone." The screen behind them shifted once more. The app's dashboard minimized, replaced by a simple profile page. A name, a role, founder, chief executive officer, Leo. The words hung there, stark and undeniable. "He's not a contractor," the woman said. "He's not a consultant. He's not someone who helped build anything." She paused, letting the truth settle where it needed to. "He is the company." The room felt like it exhaled all at once. Shock rippled through faces that had been trained never to show it. Calculations were being redone in real time. Respect, late but unavoidable, replaced disbelief. Leo stood still, his hands at his sides. The moment didn't change him. It revealed him. "We've offered Leo the position of CEO moving forward," the man said, "with full operational control." He smiled slightly. He earned it. Bryce shook his head slowly, as if denial could undo what had already been spoken. "This is insane," he whispered. "He was cleaning floors." Leo looked at him one last time. "Yes," he said simply. There was no speech after that, no victory lap. The truth didn't need embellishment. It had already crushed every lie in the room. And at the center of it all stood the person no one had bothered to see, now holding everything they thought they owned. The door opened again, but this time it didn't draw laughter or curiosity. It drew attention. A man stepped into the room with the kind of presence that didn't announce itself and didn't need to. His hair was graying at the temples, his suit understated but immaculate. He didn't look around in confusion. He looked around in assessment, as if everything in front of him was already familiar. Bryce saw him and stiffened. "Dad?" he said, the words slipping out before he could stop it. The man didn't answer right away. He walked past the stage, past the investors, past Leo, his eyes taking everything in with quiet precision. He stopped near the center of the room and finally turned to face his son. "What's going on here?" he asked. Bryce swallowed. "It's a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "They're confused about who built the app." The man glanced at the screen behind them, still displaying Leo's name beneath the titles Founder and Chief Executive Officer. He looked back at Bryce slowly. "Are they?" he asked. Bryce forced a laugh. "Yes, no. It's complicated." The investors didn't interrupt. They didn't need to. This wasn't their moment to speak. The man turned to them instead. "Is my son the founder of this company?" he asked plainly. The woman answered without hesitation. "No." The word landed harder than any insult. The man nodded once, absorbing it. "Did he present himself as such today?" "Yes," the man at the table said. The older man exhaled through his nose, a sound that carried disappointment more than anger. He turned back to Bryce, his expression no longer questioning, only resolved. "You lied," he said. Bryce's face flushed. "I didn't lie," he snapped. "I just simplified things." "You stole," the man replied calmly, "and you embarrassed yourself doing it." Bryce took a step back. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "I was going to fix it. I just needed time." The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Time doesn't turn lies into truth," he said, "and entitlement doesn't turn you into a creator." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, tapping the screen once. "You're done," he said. Bryce blinked. "Done with what?" "With everything," his father replied. "Effective immediately, you're removed from any role, title, or association with my firm." Bryce laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "You can't do that. It's my inheritance." The man finally looked at him with something like sadness. "It was," he said, "until today." The room felt like it was holding its breath. "I spent my life building a name," the man continued, "not so you could hide behind it, but so you could earn your own." Bryce's hands shook. "You're choosing him over me?" he demanded, pointing toward Leo. "I'm choosing the truth," his father said. "You chose deception." He turned slightly, addressing the room. "Any financial privileges extended to my son are revoked," he said. "Effective now." Bryce's confidence collapsed in real time. His shoulders slumped, his mouth opening and closing without words. "You can't just leave me with nothing," he whispered. The man looked at him one last time. "You were never entitled to everything," he said. "You were supposed to grow into it." Bryce staggered back, the weight of the moment finally crushing through whatever denial remained. The suits, the swagger, the certainty. They drained out of him, leaving something small and exposed behind. He looked around the room, searching for sympathy. He found none. Leo watched in silence. This wasn't victory. It wasn't revenge. It was consequence. Bryce sank into a chair, his head dropping into his hands as the room slowly returned to motion around him. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. Papers shifted. Decisions moved forward without him. His father turned away. The matter settled. And just like that, the power Bryce had worn like armor vanished, revealing how thin it had always been. Bryce didn't look up at first. He stayed slumped in the chair, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if it might offer an escape. The room around him had moved on, conversations resuming in lowered voices, investors shifting their attention back to contracts and screens. Whatever Bryce had been trying to be here was already over. Leo turned to leave. He had taken only a few steps when he heard it. Leo. The voice was quieter than anyone in the room had ever heard it, stripped of arrogance, stripped of certainty. Leo stopped, but he didn't turn around yet. "I'm sorry," Bryce said. The words sounded unfamiliar in his mouth, like something borrowed and ill-fitting. "I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't mean to ruin everything." Leo faced him then. Bryce had stood taller than him so many times before, in hallways, in restaurants, in moments designed to make other people feel small. Now he looked diminished, not because of what had been taken from him, but because he finally understood what he had never built. "I was wrong," Bryce said, his voice breaking slightly. "I treated you like nothing, like you didn't matter." Leo studied him for a long moment, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with clarity. "I know," Leo said. Bryce swallowed. Can you forgive me?" The room seemed to lean in, waiting. This was the part stories usually rush toward, the moment of triumph, the chance to say something sharp enough to draw blood. Leo didn't take it. "I don't need revenge," he said calmly. "Life already taught you." The words weren't cruel, they were final. Bryce nodded slowly, as if something heavy had finally settled inside him. He didn't argue. He didn't beg again. He just sat there, understanding at last that this was not a defeat he could negotiate his way out of. Leo turned away and walked out without another word. The hospital room was quieter than Leo remembered. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, soft and pale, resting gently on white walls that no longer felt hostile. Machines hummed steadily, no longer urgent, no longer screaming for attention. His mother slept peacefully now. The doctor spoke in careful, measured tones, explaining procedures completed, treatments approved, plans in motion. Leo listened, nodded, signed where needed. This time no one hesitated. No one asked if he was sure. No one mentioned balances or coverage. The bills were settled, every one of them. When his mother woke, she looked stronger already, color slowly returning to her face. She smiled when she saw him standing there, relief washing over her features. "You look different," she said softly. Leo smiled back. "I feel different." She reached for his hand, her grip steadier than it had been in weeks. "Did everything work out?" He squeezed her fingers gently. "It's getting there." As she drifted back to sleep, Leo sat beside her, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel like something he had to outrun. It felt like something he could finally walk toward. The house didn't look like something out of a magazine. That was the first thing Leo noticed. It sat on a quiet street where trees leaned toward each other like old friends, their shadows stretching lazily across the driveway. The paint wasn't perfect. The fence had character. Nothing gleamed aggressively. Nothing announced itself. It simply existed, solid and unpretentious, the way safety was supposed to feel. Leo stood there for a long moment before unlocking the door. Inside, the rooms were empty, sunlight spilling across bare floors that no one had ever scrubbed for tips or insults. He walked through slowly, touching nothing, letting the silence settle around him. This silence was different from the one he had known before. It wasn't absence, it was peace. Outside, a modest car sat parked at the curb. New, but not flashy. Reliable. Chosen for function, not applause. Leo had signed the papers without ceremony, declined the sales pitch, and driven it home alone. No photos, no posts, no announcement. Life didn't need an audience. Days passed quietly. His mother moved into the house with him, her steps steadier now, her laughter returning in small, unexpected moments. She tended to the garden out back, humming softly, the sound grounding in a way no achievement ever had been. One afternoon, a knock came at the door. Leo knew who it was before he opened it. Maya stood on the porch, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, eyes nervous but honest. She didn't dress to impress this time. No performance, no shield of confidence borrowed from the people around her. "I heard about everything," she said. "I should have said something back then. I didn't, and I'm sorry." Leo listened without interrupting. She swallowed. "I was scared," she admitted, "of being wrong, of standing alone. I let that matter more than doing the right thing." There was a pause between them, filled with all the moments that hadn't happened when they should have. Leo nodded slowly. "I know." Maya searched his face, hopeful but braced for disappointment. "Do you think we could start over?" Leo looked past her, at the street, at the quiet life he had finally stepped into. He thought of the nights he had stood alone when it mattered. He thought of silence and what it cost. "I don't hold it against you," he said, "but some doors only open once." Her eyes softened, understanding settling in. She nodded, accepting the truth without argument. "I'm glad you're okay," she said. "So am I," Leo replied. They parted without bitterness, without regret, just clarity. That evening, Leo sat on the front steps as the sun dipped below the rooftops. The sky painted in muted colors that didn't need names. He watched the neighborhood slow, watched lights turn on one by one, each window holding a story no one else could see. He hadn't changed the world, he had changed his. And in doing so, he had learned something no amount of money or recognition could teach. Some people walk through life stepping on others, convinced it's the only way up. They mistake silence for weakness. They mistake humility for insignificance. They forget that the ground they push others into is the same ground that holds them up. Leo stood, unlocked the door, and went back inside. The lesson lingered quietly, without fanfare, etched into everything that had led him here. The people you step on today might be the ones who decide your future tomorrow.